Morning came cold and clear. The storm had passed. The land lay quiet under a blanket of white snow. The sky was pale blue, the air sharp. Owen Zeller stood outside his cabin before the sun was up. His breath showed in the icy air. He hitched, dusted his stallion to the post, and went to split kindling. The steady rhythm of the axe echoed through the still forest. The work kept his hands warm, but his mind was elsewhere. Inside, Annie stirred. The warmth of the stove had filled the cabin. Again, she sat up slowly, the quilt wrapped tight around her shoulders. Her hair was tangled from sleep, her cheeks pale. Her eyes met Owen's when he came back inside. Something passed between them. Not fear, not awkwardness. Quiet understanding of what they had shared the night before. Of the vows spoken by firelight. Annie's voice was soft.
If you have
Paper, and a pencil. I need to write to someone. Owen nodded. He pulled a tin box from the shelf and set it on the table. My sister Clara, Annie explained. She lives near Helena now. I need her to know that I am safe. You left her behind in Red Lodge? Owen asked gently. Annie nodded. She married a miner and moved west last spring. She's the only one I trust. She took the pencil. With fingers still stiff from cold, her hand shook a little as she wrote, pausing often. It seemed she weighed every word with care. Owen didn't read over her shoulder. Instead, he poured coffee and sat quietly. Watching the steam rise between them, at last Annie folded the letter and sealed it. Her fingers lingered on the edge of the envelope. Will you post it for me in town? She asked softly. I will, Owen said. And while I'm there, I'll speak to the magistrate. We'll make it legal. Annie's gaze stayed on the envelope. You don't seem like a man who does things halfway. I don't see the point in halfway, Owen answered. She looked around the small cabin. Her eyes landed on the tools. The shelves lined with supplies, the old quilt hanging over the back window, the worn boots by the door. You live quiet, she said. Owen nodded. Quiet suits me. Have you always been alone out here? She asked. He hesitated for a moment. Since my brother passed, he and I built this place together. He ran trap lines. I broke horses. Annie did not press further. She simply nodded, then turned her gaze back to the fire. Later that morning, Owen saddled Dust for the ride into town. The sun had melted some of the snow, revealing patches of brown earth and golden grass. Annie came out onto the porch, a borrowed shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders. You'll be back before dark? She asked. I will, Owen promised. Annie glanced at the horizon, then at him. I'll keep the fire going, if you have. Flour, ... I can start bread. Owen tilted his head slightly. You bake? She smiled faintly. When there's something worth warming. He left with that image in his mind, and he's standing there, barefoot on the porch, wrapped in wool, framed by the clean sky. He didn't look back, but he carried the picture with him all the way into town. It was after sundown when Owen returned. The air was colder again.
God.
The snow crunched beneath his boots as he opened the cabin door. A warm scent met him. Not only the heat of the stove, the smell of fresh bread and something rich simmering in the pot. Annie stood by the hearth, sleeves rolled up, cheeks flushed from the warmth of the stove. Her eyes lifted to meet his as he entered. The letter? She asked quietly. It's on its way, Owen said. I spoke to the postmaster myself, and the magistrate. Owen nodded. It's done. We're legal now. Annie looked away, her hands busy with the ladle. Her voice was quieter. I didn't expect it to feel like anything, ... but it does. Owen stepped closer. He didn't touch her, but stood near enough that she could feel his presence. What does it feel like? He asked. Like I finally stepped out of someone else's story and into my own. They ate together in the quiet, not the heavy silence of strangers, but the gentle peace of two people learning to share space. Afterward, Annie stood at the window, watching the stars come out over the dark ridge. Do you think? She asked softly. A person can change what they were meant for. Owen joined her at the window. hands in his pockets. I think some folks are meant for hard things. But that doesn't mean they have to stay there. Annie looked up at him. And you, Owen. What were you meant for? He met her gaze, steady. As stone, maybe this, maybe you. They stood close, side by side, until the fire burned low. Snow had begun falling across Montana territory. The first snow of the season. The wind came down from the mountains, sharp and cold. Sweeping through the trees and across the empty land, Owen Zeller rode through the forest, guiding his big stallion. Dust. His breath showed in white clouds. The sky was heavy with more snow. He had been out since morning, checking trap lines. The work was done, and he was turning toward home when something caught his eye. White. Not snow. Not ice. A thin scrap of cloth tangled on a branch by the creek. Owen stopped the horse. His sharp eyes studied the fabric. A veil it fluttered in the wind. His heart gave a small jump. Swung down from the saddle, rifle on his back, boots crunching. Frost-covered leaves. He followed the trail of torn cloth through the brush. Then he saw her. A woman. She was sitting beneath a cottonwood tree, knees drawn up tight to her chest. Her dress, once white and fine, was now torn and dirty. Her lips were blue from the cold. She was shivering hard, her arms wrapped around her. Thin body, her wide eyes met Owen's. Fear. She looked terrified, like a trapped deer. Owen spoke softly. "Ma, am you hurt?" She could not speak at first. Her teeth were chattering too hard. Slowly, she shook her head. Owen stepped closer. He shrugged off his thick coat and held it out. "You will be... ... if you stay out here any longer." The woman did not pull away. Her frozen fingers clutched the coat as he placed it around her shoulders. The wool swallowed her small frame. "Owen," he said gently. "Owen Zeller. My cabin is not far. Can you walk?" For a moment she looked unsure. Then she gave a small nod. Her legs shook as she stood. Owen moved quickly to steady her, one hand on her back, the other gripping. "Her frozen fingers, Annie," she whispered at last. "Annie Orwood." Owen paused, frowning slightly at the name. "Do you have family nearby, Annie?" "No," she said in a small voice. I was to be married in Red Lodge, but I ran." She didn't say more. He didn't ask not now. They rode slowly through the falling snow. Annie sat in front of him on the saddle, her back pressed to his chest. His arms held her steady. The wind grew colder, the sky darker. By the time they reached his cabin, a small place of 2 rooms, with smoke curling from the chimney, the snow had begun to cover the ground in thick white. Owen led her inside. The warmth of the cabin wrapped around them. He stoked the fire high and set a pot of water to boil. Annie sat close to the flames. Her thin fingers reached out to the warmth. Still she shivered. Owen prepared a bowl of stew, venison, and root. Vegetables. He placed it in her hands. Slowly, with shaking fingers, she ate. Her eyes never left the fire. After a while, she spoke again. "He was twice my age," she said softly. "My father owed him money," the sheriff said. "There was no other way." Owen listened quietly. "So I ran," Annie went on. "I followed the creek, hoping to reach Billings. I got lost. I've been out since last night." "You did right?" Owen said quietly. No one should be forced into such a thing.
"Oh."
Her eyes lifted to meet his. There was a new light in them, something softer. "You don't know me," she whispered. "I know you needed help," Owen said simply. The cabin fell into silence again, but this time it was a gentle one. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind howled. Later, Annie stood. "I shouldn't stay here. Not in a man's cabin. Not like this." Owen stood too. He looked at her eyes calm. "Then marry me." "Yes." Her mouth fell open. She stared at him, right? "Here," Owen said. "Right now. I have a Bible. We can say the vows. I will ride into town tomorrow and make it legal." Annie's voice trembled. You would do that for me? He nodded. If it gives you a name and a roof, in safety. Then yes. For a long moment, she was silent. Then she gave a small nod. Owen pulled the Bible from the shelf. His voice was strong and steady as he read the vows. Annie's voice was soft, but sure, when she repeated them, her hand trembling in his. When it was done, Owen met her gaze. You are safe here, Annie, I promise you. Her eyes shone now, not with fear, with hope. The days that followed were clear and cold. The snow stayed on the ground, white and shining under the sun. The nights were long, the stars bright in the sky. Each morning, Owen rose early, chopped wood, tended the animals, and made sure the cabin stayed warm. Each time he stepped inside, the sight of Annie greeted him by the fire, sweeping the floor or kneading dough. Her cheeks grew rosier each day, the blue slowly leaving her lips. Her voice grew stronger. The shyness between then began to ease. One morning, Annie stood by the window, watching the snow. She spoke softly. I never thought I'd live a life like this, peaceful, simple. Owen set down the bucket of water he had carried in. Simple life can be a good life, he said. Annie turned to him. It feels strange. For so long, I only knew fear, and duty. Now, I can breathe. Owen understood he had known loss. He had known loneliness. Now, with her in the cabin, things felt different. Warmer, brighter. That afternoon, he found an old sewing kit in the cupboard. She sat by the window, mending the torn hem of her dress. Her fingers moved with care, though the fabric was thin from wear. Owen watched her quietly. You sew well, he said. My mother taught me, Annie replied, before she passed. I used to help her with everything. There was a pause. Then Annie added, I want to repay you, Owen, for saving me, for giving me a name, a place. You owe me nothing, Owen said softly. You don't need to repay kindness. But, Annie shook her head. I want to help here. I can cook. I can mend. I can make this place better. Owen looked at her steady. Then stay. That's all I ask. That evening, after supper, they sat together by the fire. Annie read from the Bible, while Owen whittled a piece of wood. Her voice, soft and steady, filled the small room. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, but inside it felt safe. When the reading was done, Annie set the book aside. Her gaze met Owen's. You are a good man, she said softly. Owen's voice was low. I only try. To be, a few days later, a heavy snow fell again. Owen stayed close to the cabin, splitting wood and keeping the fire strong. Annie baked bread, the warm smell filling the air. After the snow stopped, Owen saddled Dust and rode into town for supplies. When he returned, Annie met him at the door, eyes bright. You brought flour, she said with a small smile. Coffee. He handed her the sack. Thought you'd like it. That night, they ate warm stew and fresh bread. The simple meal felt like a feast. Later, as they sat by the fire, Annie spoke again. When I was a girl, she said softly, I dreamed of a life like this, not of grand things, just of peace. Awaking each day without fear. Owen listened. He didn't speak right away. Then he said, you deserve that. Everyone does. Annie's eyes glistened. It feels, strange, to be safe. Owen's gaze held hers. You are safe now, as long as you are here. The days grew into weeks. The cold stayed, but inside the cabin, there was warmth of fire, of food, of growing trust. One morning, a knock came at the door. A rider from town. He handed Owen a letter. Annie's hands trembled as she opened it. It was from her sister Clara. She is well, Annie said after reading. She is happy I am safe, she says. If I want, I can come live with her. Owen stood silent, waiting. Annie looked up at him. Her voice was soft. But I do not wish to leave. Owen's heart thudded in his chest. You are free to choose, he said simply. Annie's gaze was steady. I choose to stay. That evening, they sat close by the fire. Not out of duty, not out of need, but by choice. The silence between them was warm. Owen spoke quietly. Annie, life out here can be hard, but with someone to share it, it is good. Annie reached out, her fingers brushing his, and let us share it. In that moment, a simple truth settled between them. Together, they had found something neither had expected: hope, and maybe something more. Winter loosened its grip. The snow began to melt. Cold winds still blew at night, but the days grew longer, the sun stronger. Small signs of spring showed along the edge of the forest. Birds returned. The creek, once frozen, now flowed clear. And fast Owen Zeller stood on the porch one bright morning, the smell of pine in the air. Behind him, in the cabin, Annie hummed softly as she worked. The sound brought a warmth to his heart. It was a sound he had never heard in this place before. A sound of life. Later, Annie came to the door. She held a basket filled with fresh bread and a small cloth bundle. I thought, she said with a shy smile, we could visit town together. You've done so much for me. I want to stand beside you, not just here, but in the world. Looked at her, proud and a little surprised. If you're ready, then so am I. They rode together into town. The path was muddy from the thaw, but the sky was clear. Annie rode in front of Owen, her back straight, her eyes bright with new strength. The townsfolk watched as they passed. Some whispered, but most smiled. Word had spread already of the woman Owen Zeller had saved, of the wedding vows spoken in a quiet cabin. At the general store, Annie spoke with the women there. Her voice was soft but sure. She chose new fabric, sewing thread, small things for the cabin. Owen paid without a word, proud to see her standing tall. Outside on the street, the town schoolteacher, Miss Talbot, greeted them. Mrs. Zeller, she said kindly, I'm glad to meet you at last. Annie flushed, then smiled. I am glad too. They returned home as the sun began to dip behind the hills. Owen helped Annie down from the horse. On the porch, she turned to him. Thank you, she said quietly, for giving me this life. Owen shook his head. You gave yourself this life. You chose to stay. That night they sat by the fire as always. The cabin felt warmer than before. Not from the flames, but from what had grown between them. Trust, kindness. Something deeper. Annie looked at the small table where her letter from Clara rested. She asked again. Annie said softly, she says her door is always open. That I could still come. Owen's heart tightened. He nodded slowly. The choice is still yours. Annie reached for his hand. Her fingers were warm, steady. I am sure I am home. Spring came fully at last. The forest bloomed green again. Birds nested in the trees. Owen planted a small garden by the side of the cabin. Annie worked beside him, sleeves rolled up, hair tied back. Laughter came easily between them now. One afternoon, as they sat beneath the tall pines, Annie spoke. I was meant for a different life, she said softly. A hard life, one of fear. Owen took her hand. We do not have to stay in what we were meant for, Annie smiled. I know that now. Summer brought long days and warm nights. Owen built a new porch for the cabin. Annie sewed curtains for the windows. Together, they made the place a true home. When the first leaves of fall began to turn gold, Annie stood one morning on the porch. She watched the sunlight through the trees. Owen came beside her. It has been a year, she said softly. Year since that night, ... by the creek. Owen looked at her, his gaze steady. A year since hope began. Annie leaned against him, her voice full of quiet joy. I did not just find safety here. I found life. I found love. Owen wrapped his arm around her, and I found you. They stood together in the golden light, side by side. The forest whispered around them, full of life. The cabin, once cold and lonely, now held warmth, laughter, and love. and in each other's eyes, they found what they had once thought lost, a new beginning.